What if Melissa Dillon, the sharp, sophisticated, and ever so slightly mysterious new face at Forrester Creations, wasn't just another ambitious junior executive poached from a European fashion house, but was in fact a secret Forrester, a hidden branch of the family tree so carefully buried that even Eric's memory of a long-lost flame has faded to sepia. The signs, had anyone been looking with eyes unclouded by ego, were always there. The intuitive way she handled a bolt of silk, the instinctive disdain for Ridge's habit of taking total credit for a half-finished sketch, and the haunting shape of her jawline when she turned in a certain light, a shadow of the late Stephanie Forrester's unyielding resolve. But Steffi, the reigning queen of Forrester's executive suite, saw only a threat to her parking space and her father's fragile attention span. The real explosion, however, wouldn't come from a corporate rivalry over a spring collection. It would come from a genealogical bomb dropped in the middle of a boardroom, detonating everything Steffi believes about her birthright, her legacy, and her very identity as the matriarch in waiting. Imagine the scene. Not a sweeps week cliffhanger, but a quiet Tuesday. A routine shareholder meeting, made tense only by Melissa's recent ascension to head of international licensing, a role Steffi believed was rightfully hers to delegate. Steffi, perched at the head of the table in a crimson power suit that screams, "My blood runs plaid," is grilling Melissa on a minor distribution discrepancy when Eric, uncharacteristically silent, shuffles a yellowed envelope from his breast pocket. "There's something you all need to know," he says, his voice carrying the weight of a secret kept for 30 years. "Melissa isn't just a gifted designer. She's my daughter." The silence that follows isn't empty. It's packed with the shrapnel of a detonated dynasty. Steffi's pen, a Mont Blanc that was a gift from her late grandmother, clatters onto the mahogany. Her first emotion isn't anger, it's a vacuum, a literal inability to process the syllables. You're what?" she whispers, her voice cracking on the final consonant in a way that hasn't happened since she was a child. Then the vacuum fills with magma. "No," she says, standing so abruptly her ergonomic chair spins into the wall. "No, absolutely not. I would know. I would feel that. Grandmother would have known. The universe does not simply forget a Forrester. But of course, the universe does. And the Forrester family, for all its designer labels and cliffside mansions, is a masterclass in forgetting." Eric, in a rare moment of candor, explains, decades ago, during a separation from Stephanie that no one but the family lawyer remembers, he had a brief, passionate affair with a French textile artist named Camille Dillon. Camille became pregnant, returned to Lyon, and gave birth to a daughter. She never asked for money, never called, never appeared on the cover of Women's Wear Daily. She raised Melissa alone, surrounded by looms and indigo vats, and only on her deathbed did she reveal the truth, handing Melissa a letter Eric had written, a letter full of foolish, youthful promises and a single photograph of the Forrester mansion. Melissa, now 32, didn't come for revenge. She came for belonging. For a whiff of that strange, volatile, creative fire that is the Forrester bloodline. But try explaining that to Steffi, who is now pacing the length of the design floor, her heels striking the marble like a death march. "This is a hostile takeover through genetics," she hisses to Liam later, though Liam, ever the peacemaker, suggests she, maybe just talk to her. Steffi's response is a look that could curdle cream. The real psychological collapse, however, isn't about shares or corner offices, it's about the sacred mythology Steffi has built her entire life upon. She is the granddaughter of Stephanie Forrester, the iron-willed matriarch who famously drove away every interloper, every half-sibling, every whisper of infidelity. Steffi's entire sense of legitimacy, of being the true heir, rests on the idea that Stephanie's blood is the only blood that matters. And yet here is Melissa, calm, talented, and utterly unruffled by Steffi's tantrums, whose very existence proves that Eric's wandering eye produced a child who is, in some ways, more creatively pure than any of Stephanie's offspring. Melissa doesn't want the CEO chair, she wants to revive the couture atelier. She doesn't want Ridge's approval, she thinks his collar points are fashion cowardice. And that, more than any corporate coup, drives Steffi insane. Because you can't fire a sister. You can't intimidate a blood relative. And you certainly can't scream, "You don't belong here," at someone who shares your father's bone structure and your grandmother's stubborn chin. The meltdown happens not in a boardroom, but in the Forrester mansion's living room, the same living room where Stephanie once tore into Brooke Logan with surgical precision. Steffi corners Melissa after a family dinner that Eric insisted upon, a dinner where Donna served casserole and no one mentioned the elephant in the room wearing a couture gown. "Let me make this very clear," Steffi begins, her voice trembling with the effort of control. "I don't care if you have a birth certificate signed by God. You are not a Forrester. A Forrester is raised in this house, under this roof, with her," she points to a portrait of Stephanie, watching over them. "A Forrester earns their place through decades of betrayal, loyalty, screaming matches, and forgiveness that never quite takes. You don't get to skip the war and claim the crown." Melissa, sipping a glass of Sauvignon Blanc, responds with a quietness that is infinitely more infuriating than a shout. "I'm not here for a crown, Steffi. I'm here because my mother used to sing me a song about a man who built dresses like cathedrals. I wanted to see the cathedrals." That answer, that serene, artistic, non-corporate answer, is what finally makes Steffi lose her mind. She flashes back to every time her grandmother dismissed her as too emotional, every time Ridge chose a new wife over his own children, every time Taylor warned her that the Forrester legacy was a poisoned chalice. And in that flash, Steffi sees Melissa not as a rival, but as a mirror, a reflection of the version of herself that could have existed if she hadn't been forged in the crucible of the bold and the beautiful's endless cycles of betrayal. Melissa is the Forrester who got to be creative instead of combative. The one who didn't have to fight for scraps of affection from a father who treats women like seasonal collections. And that, more than any threat to her job, is what Steffi cannot bear. So Steffi does what Steffi does best when cornered, she overcorrects into cruelty. She calls an emergency board meeting without Eric's knowledge, rallies the existing shareholders, many of whom owe her favors, and proposes a vote to clarify the definition of family voting rights, a transparent attempt to exclude Melissa from the trust. She leaks a story to a tabloid about Camille Dillon being a gold-digging opportunist, not realizing that Melissa has already donated her entire inheritance from her mother to a scholarship fund for young female designers. She even tries to turn Thomas against Melissa, whispering that Melissa's presence will dilute their children's inheritance. But Thomas, for once, sees clearly. "She's not the enemy, Steffi," he says, exhausted. "You are. To yourself." The final crack in Steffi's sanity arrives not from Melissa, but from Eric. In a moment of rare paternal clarity, Eric announces that he is amending the will to give Melissa an equal share, not out of guilt, but out of admiration for her work on the new sustainable capsule collection. "She has Stephanie's integrity," Eric says, and Steffi flinches as if slapped. "In my imagination, she belongs here." Hearing her father's approval, the same approval she has chased her entire life, lavished upon a woman who showed up last Tuesday, who didn't endure the catfights, the shotgun weddings, the pregnancies revealed on yachts, the endless, grinding performance of being a Forrester woman, it breaks something fundamental in Steffi. She walks out of the mansion in a daze, ends up at the beachside bar where she married Liam the first time, and orders a vodka she doesn't drink. She stares at the ocean and realizes, all her life, she has been guarding a castle that was never really under siege. The interlopers she fought, Hope, Brooke, Sally, even Quinn, they were all proxies for a deeper fear, that she herself was not enough, that her own Forrester blood was somehow diluted. And now here is proof. Here is a woman who is 50% Forrester by DNA and 100% Forrester by talent, who didn't need to claw her way to the top because she arrived already whole. Melissa doesn't hate Steffy. That's the cruelest part. She doesn't want Steffy's parking spot, her title, or her memories of Stephanie's harsh love. Melissa just wants to design, to be acknowledged, to belong to a family that, for all its dysfunction, creates beauty. And in that wanting, she holds up a mirror to Steffy's own hollowed-out ambition. The meltdown, when it finally comes, is not a screaming fit. It's worse. It's a quiet breakdown in the Forrester Creations archive, surrounded by decades of sketches, where Steffy sobs to a rack of her grandmother's original gowns. I was supposed to be the one. I was the one who stayed. I was the one who fought. Doesn't that count for anything? And the answer, whispered on the wind through the ventilation system, is the same answer Melissa has given all along. Legacy isn't about who fought hardest. It's about who's still standing when the fighting stops, ready to sow something new. In the end, Steffy doesn't lose her mind forever. She loses it just long enough to realize that she has a choice: continue the war against a woman who never enlisted, or finally grow into the matriarch her grandmother always claimed she could be. The last scene of this particular what-if arc wouldn't be a catfight on a staircase. It would be Steffy, humbled and hollowed, walking into Melissa's new atelier. She would hold out a bolt of the same crimson silk Stephanie once used for her signature suit. "I can't promise to like you," Steffy would say, her voice raw. "But grandmother always said the best Forrester collections came from conflict. So let's fight. On the runway. Where it belongs." And Melissa, the secret Forrester, would smile, not a triumphant smile, but a sad, knowing one, and offer Steffy a seat at the pattern table. Because that, ultimately, would be the real twist. Not that Melissa is a secret Forrester, but that her secret was never about blood. It was about reminding Steffy that being a Forrester isn't a birthright to defend. It's a fire to feed, and the only unforgivable sin is letting it burn out alone. Steffy, for the first time, would realize she doesn't have to lose her mind. She just has to lose her grip on the idea that she was ever meant to rule alone. And in that loss, she would finally, truly, become her grandmother's heir.